I can buy 1,000 really nice, high-quality mealworms for about $20. And those mealworms will last my reptiles about a month, maybe even less. So over the course of 1 year, I'd be spending a few $100s on food for my reptiles. If you have backyard chickens or a different type of animal, they will go through these mealworms much faster, so it can get really, really expensive really quickly. I've been keeping reptiles for over 7 years, so costs can really add up, and I try to save money any way I can. Farming your own feeder insects, whether it's crickets, dubia roaches, or mealworms, is a really effective way to reduce the cost of keeping your pets. I've tried many different methods of farming mealworms, and for me, the way I'm about to show you has been the most effective, so I can't wait to share it with you. One of the most important things about keeping mealworms successfully is understanding their different life stages. Mealworms are actually a species of darkling beetle, and they start out as teeny tiny little eggs. After a few weeks, the eggs hatch into tiny worms. The worms are so small at first you can barely even see them, but eventually they will get to a size that you can feed your pets. If you let them develop past the worm stage, they'll turn into a pupa, and after a couple of weeks, they emerge as adult beetles that can reproduce and lay more eggs for you. Their entire life cycle can actually last 6 to 9 months, maybe even more. Now that you know what to expect from the life cycle of your mealworms, you can start your mealworm farm. I do have to add a disclaimer here. I bet you didn't know this, but depending on where you get your mealworms, they might not pupate or turn into beetles at all. The mealworms that you can get at your local are sometimes sprayed with a chemical that prevents them from pupating, meaning they'll stay mealworms and keep growing and growing and growing until they die. This might sound bad, but the pet store doesn't actually intend for you to start farming mealworms yourself, so to them, it extends the shelf life of the product that you're getting. If you're planning on starting a mealworm farm, I highly recommend you go to a wild bird store or you find a local or online breeder to buy them, because I can't guarantee that your local pet store mealworms are actually going to do what they're supposed to. Okay, now that disclaimer's out of the way, let's move on to starting your mealworm farm. The easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is getting one of these Sterilite 3-tier drawers. You can get these for like $10 at Walmart or Target or even on Amazon. If you're feeding something like chickens or something that will eat a lot of mealworms at once, you will need 2 or 3 of these, or maybe find one with bigger drawers. But for my reptile collection, this is the perfect size to produce the amount of food that they go through. Mealworms, in their worm stage, have 2 goals. They want to eat and they want to burrow. These 2 tasks are really all they're designed to do at this point in their lives. So, to make them happy, I recommend giving them something they can eat and burrow into at the same time. Personally, I use rolled oats, but any meal or grain, like cornmeal or wheat bran, will work. You'll take your oats or bran and fill the drawers up about halfway. Don't fill them too high, otherwise your mealworms will be able to crawl up and escape out of the drawer system. Take your mealworms and dump them into the top tray. They will eat the oatmeal, but I also offer them fresh fruits and veggies to eat because this is what will give them their water. I replace the fresh food every few days so it doesn't mold. As the mealworms eat the oatmeal, they will start to produce waste. This waste is called frass, and it's actually a really good fertilizer, so if you have houseplants or a garden, I recommend sifting it out a couple times a year and then sprinkling it onto all of your plants. The key to having a mealworm farm is separating the beetles from the larvae. I can't stress this enough. You have to separate them if you want a successful mealworm colony, because the beetles will cannibalize the mealworms, and they will cannibalize the pupa. You'll end up with a bunch of dead bugs instead of a life cycle which yields food for your animals. So, you can see here, these mealworms have turned into their pupa form, and after a week or 2 they will emerge as beetles. At this point, I would take them out of the tier they're in, and you can either place them into a separate container or into the beetle tray. The beetles are busy in the bottom tier right now, reproducing and laying eggs. They were in the bottom drawer for a few months before I started to notice any mealworm babies. So if it's taking a while to see results, that's totally normal. Once you start noticing a lot of babies in the same drawer as your beetles, it's time to move the beetles to a different tray. This is the most labor-intensive part about farming your mealworms, but honestly, it only took me an hour, and I only have to do it 3 or 4 times a year. Again, I only separate the beetles once I notice a lot of baby worms in the tray. Then the beetles get moved from the bottom to the top or to the middle so that they can keep laying eggs while the other baby worms grow up. This way, you can always have a cycle of worms that you can feed to your pets, and you always have beetles laying more eggs for you, and nobody's eating anybody. The only other thing I can recommend for your mealworm colony is once or twice a year, I would buy a fresh batch of worms from a local store to give some diversity to your genetic stock. I know what you're gonna say. Tatiana, we're doing this so that we don't have to buy mealworms anymore, but just hear me out. Mealworm beetles release pheromones when they're ready to reproduce. And there are studies that show that the more inbred a beetle is, the less sexual pheromones they will produce. And then they will stop reproducing entirely if their genetic stock isn't maintained. So it doesn't have to be all the time, maybe once a year, twice tops, I would buy a fresh batch of worms to introduce some unrelated mealworms to your colony. This will lead to your entire farm being healthier, and then your animals will be healthier too. That's it, you guys. That's all I have for today. Let me know in the comment section if you like this video or if you want to see more money-saving tricks I've developed over my years of keeping exotic pets. I hope you liked this video because I had a lot of fun sharing it with you.